Welcome back to this episode of Let's Talk Adoption. We have a great topic and a returning guest, Tammy Young. Today we're going to be talking about wait, what? And realizations for international adoption. Tammy is a life coach, three-time adoptive mom, and someone who has spent years helping children navigate both the practical and emotional sides of growing up as an adoptee and providing support to parents who are supporting those children. And Tammy, maybe you can share a little bit about your work, what you do, and how families can contact you.
Thank you. And it is a pleasure to be back speaking with you again today. I have a life coaching business, which is Young Mind Story Coaching. I coach kids, anyone in the adoption triad. I specialize in helping use the power of their minds to change their outlook and deal with whatever comes up. And everybody deals with challenges all the time. So I use stories for kids to help them wrap their heads around what's going on in their lives and how to deal with it. So story coaching is very effective. As we know, we see this biblically. Jesus used stories because it works. And so that is what I am doing for children and young adults as well. And that is my coaching business, Young Mind Story Coaching. And I can be reached at youngmindstorycoaching@gmail.com. And I also give my phone number out to people who want to reach me at 860-966-7574. And thank you very much for letting me give that information out.
Yes, and welcome back. And I love what you do and how you really correlate that with the way that we get taught faith in the Bible and those moral lessons that Jesus taught with metaphor and, parable. And if we can see the way that dots connect, then we can translate that to other life situations. And speaking of life situation, you embarked on a big adventure when you were adopting your son from Kazakhstan. Is that the first country you wanted to adopt from?
No, actually, interesting that you should ask because we looked at Cambodia and were really taken with the culture and the history in Cambodia. Fascinating, beautiful architecture. We were thinking we'll go visit Angkor Wat and wow, that's going to be so amazing. And then the country stopped everything. And so we were shocked and put a halt to that. Luckily, our home study agency had said, don't choose just one, be prepared to make a couple of choices. So, it worked out. We had done a domestic adoption as well. So we sort of had dipped our toe into a couple of different programs, and we took a turn and ended up adopting a waiting child from Kazakhstan. So you just never know where the journey will take you.
And I think that is a really good thing for families to realize the importance of flexibility, the importance of being able to pivot. Tammy, they actually adopted three times. One was privately, one was internationally, and one was through the foster system. Zero of those adoptions had an exact recipe and steps that you knew exactly when it was going to happen and how it was going to happen. Zero of those adoptions had no surprises. So I think that's why an
True.
episode like this is so great. The aha, the wait, what moment? And this is something to prepare for as parents who might be adopting internationally. What I encourage families to do is when you are looking for an adoption agency who works with international adoption, try to find one that has at least two or more country programs, so that if in the unforeseen, unexpected, but actually quite natural event that a country pauses or changes their requirements and you don't meet them anymore for whatever reason, you don't have a way to continue on that path with that specific country. You're still adopting, you transfer into another country in another country program, as Tammy did. So that is a great example and such a great wait, what moment that could happen. And as we were talking about just before we came on to the episode today, there is no path of certainty in the path to becoming parents, no matter if biologically or through any type of adoption. There's always some way that things can change in a moment. But I think what I've seen over the years is families choose to proceed. They choose to pivot. They choose to be flexible. And for every family who is called to adoption, there's a child. So they need to endeavor and continue on their path, even if it looks differently from what they expected.
So true. And it actually happened to us more than once. The first adoption we did, we were thinking we'll adopt in country, a domestic private adoption. We were actually matched with a birth mother, and things in the world changed in a way that she did not feel comfortable going forward with her adoption plan. As you know, things in the world change all the time, and some challenges in her home country, even though she was here in the US, some challenges in her home country made her feel like her child wasn't going to be safe in this country because of what was happening over there. And she decided to parent, which was quite shocking because she was really all aboard the adoption plan. So, same kind of thing. We were kind of heartbroken and then realized we're on a path and we're not in charge of that path. We will be led where we are supposed to be. And in hindsight, 20 years later, you can look back and say, wow, that was the right change for us at that time. It's really hard at the time, though. So I encourage, as you do, all parents to um, just be, I'm sorry, to just be ready to deal with whatever comes up. And as you said, be flexible and know that any change that comes up is not a reflection on you. It's just the nature of the journey.
Hmm. That is so right, especially when you are working in private adoption. If something changes with a birth mom, it's not a reflection on your ability to be great parents. And Heather and I do an episode where we talk a little bit about when a birth mom doesn't choose to place her baby with you, it's not a
Right.
personal rejection. And even in fostering to adopt, it can feel personal that a social worker didn't, you know, choose, not that it was her choice, but that she didn't advocate for you more. It can feel
Mm,
personal. It can feel like it's you against the system. But really, the system is designed for reunification for children for the most
right,
part. Yeah.
right.
Hmm. So now, we were talking about earlier, before we started, how people, and it's totally natural. I mean, we're only human. We want to picture our future, right? And we can start to get a little attached to what that looks like. And you were kind of saying how, that is part of what makes it so hard to pivot from one country. I know you've got your pup there.
Right. Yeah, they both came. It's storming here, so both of
Oh,
my pups are concerned about the weather outside. I don't,
yes. It's
contrary to
bigger
what
than
they
they are
think,
for sure. It's bigger
I
than they
don't
are.
control the weather.
So, really realizing that it is natural to start to sort of get married to that culture.
Right. And again, in hindsight, I realized that what that did for me was allow me to embrace many different cultures, which helped me as a teacher when I was teaching children from Vietnam, children from all kinds of different places who were not my own children, but needed to be supported and accepted and their culture be accepted and treasured. And so I kind of used that in my classroom as a teacher and modeled for the students how to be accepting of others and learn from each other. And I think that that is something that is not always easy for parents going through this process because as you said, you start to attach to one culture and then you have to pivot and it feels like a heartbreak, like a
Mhm.
breakup or something. But in the end, it's really part of a wonderful journey, a learning opportunity.
Yes, and it's natural and a good thing to get excited in to let yourself go like 99% all in, right? But
Right.
save a little tiny 1% for yourself because you need that for your resilience to be able to
Mm,
bounce back
right.
if things change.
Right. So true.
And so another kind of wait what moment in international adoption is starting to understand all of the many people that it will take for this adoption to take place from different countries. They all have their own government, they all have their own regulations, they all have their own culture. You're literally on opposite sides of the planet in many cases. So, what was
Right.
that like as you started to realize the depth of
Yeah,
that?
and we knew before we left that there were a lot of people involved, but when we were in country in Kazakhstan and we realized, oh my goodness, there are all of the people in the office over here who are, they are the liaisons who start the paperwork, do send all the information, help with the matching and so there were those people, but then there were also the officials who are trying to support adoption, and it's not always easy. We talked a little bit previously about how sometimes these officials are treading a kind of a, I don't want to say a slippery slope, but kind of a narrow line between wanting to support international adoption for the sake of the children who otherwise might not have as good of an opportunity, and officials in country who are concerned about losing a generation of their population. So it's kind of a balancing act for these officials. They're trying to do the best thing for the children, but at the same time appease especially government officials who are concerned about losing a percentage of the population. And that's not an easy line to walk. And so sometimes and you and I had talked about this previously, sometimes they have to do things like talk about how special needs the child is, which can be a real concern for adoptive parents going in and adopting, especially a waiting child where you don't know what there may be with this child for special needs. And sometimes some of these special needs get really raised up and heightened to greater than what we think we might be able to accept or handle. And that was a little bit eye-opening. I'll say eye-opening, a little bit scary, to be honest, because we felt like, well, we're on this journey. We're going to do this. We want to do the right thing. We want to parent this waiting child that we've been matched with, and we think that we'll be able to do for him whatever he needs. But at the same time, you feel like I had another child at home in particular, and I don't want to bring home a terribly special needs child that's going to take away from my baby at home. And that sounds like a terrible position to think about, but to be realistic, you have to think about what you can do as a parent, what you can do to be the best parent to, in my case, to both of my children. And that was a little bit scary because there was a lot of unknown.
Hmm.
And again, back to where I started, these officials talking about these special needs children who are never going to get adopted in country because they have so many problems. That was something that we were warned about before we went. They said this is the path that they take that allows the government officials to feel like they're doing the right thing and to some extent save face a little bit in country, to say that we are making a choice for the good of the child and we're not doing anything that's going to take away from our resources population wise. Again, as a parent listening to all of this, and specifically when we went to court, when I went back, well, we went to court before we left, and then there was a waiting period. So we're sitting in court and I'm listening to all of the things wrong with this child and thinking, can I handle this? And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'll handle whatever, But at the same time, I'm worried. Now I'm worried, this poor child, oh my gosh, he's going to need so much. Can I do all that he needs? All the things, so I want to encourage adoptive parents to be smart, be educated, ask all the questions. There are plenty of specialists, physicians, pediatricians who specialize in reviewing the paperwork that you get from wherever the country is that you're going. And, the paperwork that we got listed all these things. And we actually went to we got two different opinions, and they were both very helpful and said similar things that, be aware that sometimes some of these things might be somewhat true. Some of these things might be trumped up so that they can approve the adoption. Still a little nerve-wracking going through that. And it's easy to say, trust the process. Not so easy when you're going through it and you're worried. You're worried about yourself and your ability to handle whatever comes up. You're worried about the child. You want the whole point of why we do what we do going into adopt a child is because we care and we want to parent another child. In my case, I wanted to parent another child. I specifically wanted to parent a waiting child who might not otherwise have the opportunity that we provided. He is he was a very bright child. He's still a very bright person, but he's not a child anymore. Um, so, so all of that is in your mind as you're listening to all of this and you're going through the process, and you're going to be nervous and you're worried and you're feeling like, I don't know. I don't know. There is an awful lot. I'll just say that clearly. There is an awful lot that you just won't know, and it will not be clear. And you have to, as you said, be flexible, go with the flow. And in my case, I had to just trust. I felt called. I felt called to this particular child for some reason. I just knew that I had to go across the world for this child. Hindsight is 2020, but he is my son. He is perfect in my family. He looks nothing like me, but he and I share a sense of humor. He and I share a taste in music, which cracks me up because his friends think he's like, well, how old are you? What are you listening to? He likes my music, which is amusing to me. Um, that connection that we have grew out of letting it happen, letting it happen. It wasn't always easy. And I just had to trust from the very beginning when all of this scary stuff started, and they were saying, oh, he has this, he has water on the brain, he has encephalitis, and I was thinking, I don't even know what all those things mean. Oh my goodness. I had a really good pediatrician who had also adopted a child and said, we're going to see what we're going to see when he gets here. It's all good. And he was wonderful. So I recommend taking your time to pick a good pediatrician too, as part of your process to be ready.
Right. So there was your local agency in the US, there was the agency in the other country, there was the whole office staff that is piecing everything together and pushing paper forward. There are the
Right.
officials that you suddenly realize, wait, what? I am adopting a child, but to them, this is so much bigger. This is their
Right.
country. This is their next generation of their people.
Right.
This is their culture
Right.
that they're sending, and they need to be in good conscience with
Right.
all of those
So
things.
many people. And the
So
people who
many.
work in the court. There were lawyers in the courtroom, the judge in the courtroom. There were translators all along the process who translated the paperwork, but also came and did some interpretation for us so that we could answer questions for the judge when he had questions for us. So many people involved, and bless them all, because it's not an easy job what they do. And all of them, I think, are working for the good of the children. And
Hmm.
that is really a blessing.
Right. I mean, it's a wait, what? Just seeing how each hand is so instrumental, working all together for the sake of this one child.
Right.
It's
Right.
pretty, like, humbling to think about that.
Yes. Yes. When we arrived in Kazakhstan, they told us, we'll have a driver for you. We'll have a driver who picks you up at the airport. We had a driver assigned to us for our whole stay in country. He picked us up from the airport and took us to where we were staying. He picked us up every day and took us wherever we wanted to go. On the days when we weren't at the baby house, he took us to the mall. He took us to marketplaces. He took us to historical sites so that we could get a sense of the country and the culture and take pictures to have for memories. He was dedicated to us for the 2.5 weeks we were there. Wow, that again was another amazing blessing because of him, we have all kinds of memories. And we went shopping and brought home all kinds of things for our son. He has a rug from Kazakhstan that we got at a marketplace, and we could tell him we brought this home with you when you came home with us so that you would have this from here. And that was because of that driver that was just at our disposal the whole time we were there. So pretty amazing.
So, there were some things that you told me before about your travel experience that go ahead and just tell
Yes.
us.
Okay. Well, there was one day when I think we were actually coming back from the baby house one day, and we were just about to stop at a light, and it was a big city and busy cars all the time, and all of a sudden somebody bumped into us from behind. Not too hard because we weren't going that fast at that point, and the driver, I think he must have sworn. I didn't understand what he said, but it sounded like a swear, and he pulled over, and we kind of looked at each other and I was, oh, okay. The driver said, I'll be right back. And he's gone for a little while, and we look around and he's talking to the driver who was behind us, and he comes back and he's grumbling and didn't say anything. So, everything okay? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. And he gets some things and he's digging through a bag that's in his glove compartment, and he gets out some money and okay. And he leaves and he comes back and he gets in the driver's seat again. And meanwhile, cars are passing us because we had pulled over so that the rest of the traffic could pass us. And as we start driving away again, we said, is everything okay? And he said, he's grumbling, and he said, this happens sometimes. It's clear that you are Americans and that you are probably here adopting a baby because we're coming from the location where the baby house is, and because they know you have money, they hit us and they wanted money. And I was so shocked. And he said, this happens, and the agency, their in-country agency, plans for it and usually keeps a little stash in the car. And I was flabbergasted, but he said, it's part of what they have to plan for. And the idea is, if I didn't give them that money, they would call the police, and then you would have been pulled into from with the police. You would have been pulled into the whatever trouble would have been caused by that. And he said, if I just pay them off, they leave us alone and let you go. I was shocked by that. Wow. So first of all, shocked that somebody did this, thought this was a thing to do. And apparently this happens all the time, enough that the in-country agency planned for it and had a stash of cash ready for him to deal with if this happens. And he did. And he was ready and he dealt with it, and didn't even, I don't think he was going to even say much to us until I started saying, hey, What was that all about? Of course, I always have questions and I'm asking what's going on. Yeah, that was eye-opening. Totally
Yeah.
should say unrelated to the adoption, but you just never know what's going to come up when you're in a foreign country. We clearly look like Americans, and the perception is outside of our country that Americans are rich, and in some countries we are.
Hmm. Right. Or you know someone who is, so you have access to resources.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
And just, I think here in the US, we know if you're out at night, use your street smarts. Be
right,
aware, don't be on your phone. Lock your doors, roll up your windows in your car. Don't loiter around in areas like dark parking lots at grocery stores,
right,
etc. We know these things, but what you're describing takes street smarts to a whole new level that you really don't get exposed to much here in the US, where there is an organized group of people who are strategically targeting Americans who are there specifically to adopt and are staking out the route in the neighborhood and streets
right,
nearby those offices where they know you'll be.
right. And I think I also might have told you the story about being in the marketplace one day with our driver, who again was just so wonderful. Um, and I think we had gone back, or he was walking, I think he might have been walking with us or near us in the marketplace. And there was a little boy who was maybe 4 or 5, and he was crying. He was standing on the sidewalk crying. And of course, I was looking around like, where's this baby's mama? And the driver said, don't engage. And I was like, what do you mean don't engage? This is a crying baby here. And he said, get in the car. I was like, oh, okay. And now I'm almost in tears. And he said, you don't talk to him. You get in the car. And so I get in the car. I'm in the back seat now. Of course, I'm crying. And he stopped crying. Look, he stopped crying. And I looked up, and I hadn't thought about this in a while until you and I were talking. He said, look, he stopped crying. And I looked, and he'd like a switch. He had stopped crying. And I looked, and he said, down like a block down, he said, you see the woman sitting down there leaning against the brick wall, leaning against the building. That's his mother. And I was like, what? And he said, she is teaching him how to beg from people who probably love children and would have given him whatever he was asking for. She is making him rob you. And that was a real eye opener for me as well. He said that, and he called her a gypsy. He said, she's a gypsy. This is what they do. They are targeting you because, again, we clearly looked like Americans and we have money and we're there shopping. And often Americans, as you said, were there to adopt a child and going to the market to get keepsakes for themselves or for the child. And they saw us, she saw us and knew who we were and what we were doing there and targeted us as someone who would be a sucker for a baby. So she sent her baby to us to cry and get our money or whatever she thought we were going to give him, which was so heartbreaking to me because, and our driver was mad. He said, she is teaching him to be in a life of crime. So don't you be part of that. Oh my goodness. That was a real education for me. It
Hmm.
was quite, quite eye-opening. And again, it's a different culture and it's a different country, and we are so not used to that. But the driver was very much protective of the families that he drove. And so he said, I see this all the time. I see this with all the families, with all the parents I'm driving around. They're in all the markets and they see you coming.
Mm.
Yikes.
And he showed you the bigger picture.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
And he taught us, don't be part of that.
Hmm.
So that was good.
And there was something else that you did throughout your travel. You were documenting as much as you could.
Yes, yes, I was taking pictures. I have albums of pictures for my son, and I was also sending home notes every night to the family. I sent home emails, and my mom she kept it as a journal because I was sending, here's what we did today. And I didn't always remember what we were doing each day, but because we would stop at the time it was an internet cafe, we would stop at an internet cafe and I would send home a note about what we did, what he said today, what we brought him each day. We would go visit and we brought him books. And I think one of the best books we brought him was I think it was actually your first 100 words in Russian. And we chuckled about this before, how I had studied Russian and my son did not speak any Russian because they were trying to take back their culture at that time, post-Soviet breakup. They were teaching all of the kids Kazakh. He didn't speak any Russian. I didn't speak any Kazakh. So I used the first 100 words in Russian to teach him English from the pictures. And so that was his favorite thing to do each day when we visited him. We would open up the book and it had pictures. It was like I can't even remember who wrote it. It wasn't Richard Scarry, but it was that kind of pictures of city blocks or pictures of a room, and it would have all different things. And he wanted to know the name of everything. So he would sit on my lap and he would point to something in the picture and say, Mama, Mama. So what was amazing about that to me was first, he was already calling me mama because they had told him, your new mama and your new papa are coming. So he kind of knew who we were, sort
How
of.
old was he? I don't think we ever said,
He was 4,
but a very young, small, bright
and
4.
really a young 4, and had been there from the hospital. He'd been in the baby house since he was born. And so And they told me he's very clever. So I wasn't surprised that he wanted to know. He wanted to know things. So this was another thing that the agency recommended to us that I thought was brilliant. They said, bring a photo book for him that has pictures of your house, the other people in your family, the dog, his room, your car, all the things, so that you can start showing him this is where you're going to be. This is the backyard. This is your brother. This is our dog. This is your bed, all of those things. And he was kind of interested in that. And he wanted to know what all of those things were called. But then he wanted to go back to the other book because he wanted to learn what's a comb called? What's a dish called? What's a fork called? What's a cup called? All those things, orange, apple, all of those things. He just was busy brain right away. And that was excellent because that helped us make a connection pretty quickly. Um, and there's something else there too that I want to mention that's kind of related, that when we came home, and you and I didn't talk about this, but I think this is a good point for people to know if their child is going to be learning English. What happened in my experience is that he lost his first language faster than he gained English. And the only reason that mattered is that when you think in your head, when you're thinking whatever to yourself, you think in your language. So for him, losing his language so quickly, it became difficult for him to think in his head, which caused a lot of frustration for him because he didn't know how to express how he felt, and he felt a lot of things, a lot of new. Sorry, there's all kinds of noise going on behind me. I apologize. He had a lot of new feelings and he didn't know how to put any of them into words. And so when he got really overwhelmed and frustrated, he would just yell. And at first I was like, I don't know what's going on here. But I also had learned in the baby house that when a child was concerned or scared or feeling had big feelings and yelled a lot, they would give them a piece of candy because they had however many 26 kids, I think, that they were trying to deal with, three people handling 26 kids. And so, you know, that's not easy. And if you have five kids yelling and you only have three people to comfort them, you might rely on a piece of candy. So, so I say that to people, and I don't share that story as a way to say, isn't that awful? It's not what I mean at all. It's just how it was for them. They just needed some kind of tool, and that was the tool that they relied on, which made things difficult for me because I didn't want to give my 4-year-old candy when he was yelling and he didn't have the words to talk about. Normally with a 4-year-old, you'd say, use your words. Well, he didn't have them yet. So that was a challenge. Um, and I share that story with people who are adopting older kids too, just to let them know, be ready. It's not always easy. There were some days that after I got everybody calmed down into their beds, that I went into my room and thought, what am I doing? What have I done? Oh my goodness, God, really? This is what you called me to? I don't think I'm doing a good job. I prayed a lot, and thank goodness I had him to talk to, but also my grandmother. I would call my grandmother because she had two boys, and I would say, oh my goodness, today was rough. Here's what they did. And half the time she would laugh at me and she'd say, oh, yeah, Tammy, boys aren't easy. And so I share that also because it was a way that my grandmother and I kind of bonded later in life. It's an opportunity, I think, for parents to connect with their parents or grandparents on some new level. I got to hear all kinds of really funny stories about my dad that I hadn't heard before, which was really, really nice.
It is, and it was just kind of a mom to mom connection in spite of how a child comes to you, in spite of what decade, in spite of what language, culture, or country. Some things are universal. Being a mom to a
Absolutely.
little boy and how little boys have been created in a way that's different from daughters, right?
Right, right.
Yeah, so that was great support that you had, and it feels like the Lord provided that and knew that that day was coming, that you would need that.
Absolutely.
And so while you were there, you were taking a lot of photos, and those came in
Mhm.
handy.
Yes, it did. So thank you for getting me back to where we started. Um, because I think that sometimes documenting the whole journey feels like, I'm saving this for the future, but you don't know when. You don't know when that might be important. And I know I've shared a couple times that for a long time, my older son didn't want to know anything about Kazakhstan. He wasn't going to go there. He didn't want to know anything about the language. I've got books on the language. I've got pictures of beautiful architecture, beautiful mountains. I took pictures of everything. Um, he didn't want to know about any of it. Now at 26, he's decided he's going. Shocker for me. I'm thrilled for him, but I'm giving him finally the album that he didn't ever really want to see, and saying, go look at this, go see the wild horses that they still have in the mountains running along the roads. So beautiful. Um, he said, oh, yeah, that's really nice. Okay, well, it only took 20 years, but now he's interested.
Yeah, I think that that is such a great shift um, in the world today that people are embracing more of their heritage. There's more acceptance of cultural differences.
Right.
And so it's something that people are proud of now versus something that needed to be stifled so that you could assimilate as an
Absolutely.
American
Right.
and not stand
Right.
out. You didn't want to stand out. You didn't want to be different. But now our differences are celebrated,
Right.
which is so cool to see. And
Yeah,
Some of those pictures, you even took pictures around the baby house, right? Like his room, which I
I
think is
did.
such a treasure for any
Yes,
adoptee to actually have a
yes.
photograph of something that they themselves might not remember or might barely remember.
And didn't want to remember for a long time. So I
Mm.
think we talked last time about how he thought that the bedroom where he slept was haunted. The heaters in everywhere in Kazakhstan, it's all done by hot water. So they have hot water pipes that run around the edge of the room and under the windows. And so the curtains coming down over the windows just kind of hang past these hot water pipes. Well, when the pipes heat up in the wintertime, sometimes there might be a little bit of steam, sometimes it's just heat, and the heat rises and moves the curtains. And so my little guy in the end bed over by the window thought that there was a ghost who was by his bed at night. And as he grew up and talked about the ghosts in his bedroom at the baby house, I made it a point to say, now you have learned what happens when you heat something up. What happens to heat? Heat rises. If you have steam, it rises, right? And what do you think would happen to curtains hanging over those hot pipes? Oh. And when he realized it, he was like, oh, yeah, I guess that's why those curtains moved. Mm-hmm. Not a ghost, right? Right. Okay. So, and it took years for him to finally sort of wrap his head around, oh, well, yeah, okay, that's why those curtains moved. There was no ghost in my bedroom. And so that took away one of the scary things that he sort of had hung on to for a while from the baby house. That was a scary place. Going to sleep was scary. Going to sleep is the ultimate loss of control. This is the other thing that he and I talked about many times. So he never ever wanted to go to sleep because going to sleep meant letting the ghost be there and have control, maybe. I don't know what he thought. But so I would go back to that with him and talk about no ghosts, just heat. And the heat moves the curtains, and going to sleep isn't such a bad thing, right? And, that loss of control. For a baby who didn't have control over anything, the few things that they had control over, whether or not I eat, whether or not I sleep, whether or not I toilet, all of those things became, I don't want to say issues, but became things that they could control. And I had read so many adoption books and so many stories about adopting older children that none of it surprised me, but it's still hard to watch, kind of heartbreaking to realize that this child doesn't want to relax enough to go to sleep. He'd be exhausted. And, so again, I read all the books, and they all say, make sure that you have a routine at bedtime. And so one of the things, aside from we all sit together and I read us a story and I'll sing you all a song. And so I started to take requests, and I'd say, what song would you like to hear tonight? And I would sing whatever they wanted. And so I would get requests from all three when I had the three of them, I'd get requests from all three. And I'd stand in the hallway between their rooms so that they could all hear me and go to sleep. And I say, okay, that's the last song. Closing your doors now, go to sleep. And sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. But the routine, I think, goes a long way, as the books say, toward helping them move toward relaxation and going to sleep. That idea of control or loss of control became less important the longer they were with me, and the routine started to sort of help with that. Let it go to sleep, you'll feel better in the morning, kind of thing. So I tell that story also to let parents know that that's another part of the journey that's maybe going to take more time than you expect. And I really enjoyed a lot of that. and it goes so quickly. And now my kids are in their 20s, but part of that, helping them get comfortable, helping them let go and relax and go to sleep, I felt like was such a joy for me. That was the kind of thing that I wanted to be doing as a mom. So that's one of my favorite stories.
I love that you shared that. That is such a great tip and such a great picture in our minds to think when some parents come home with their children and they're having trouble sleeping, they might remember, oh, Tammy said this, and they might incorporate that as their own tradition and just sing like a mom.
Yeah, and and I'm one of those people that I tend to be, I don't want to medicate. So, so if the pediatrician said, well, we can give him some things to help him sleep, I was always like, I never wanted to do that. I never wanted, okay, well, melatonin maybe occasionally, but I didn't, in the back of my mind, I was always like, oh, well, melatonin is a hormone. I just don't want to go there. And the pediatrician was like, wow, you're kind of, in
Taking the
some
hard
ways,
way.
he was like, okay, you're kind of reading all these things, and I know you are, and I'm glad you're educated, but it's okay occasionally. And so for me too, he was like, it's okay to let go occasionally. um, but at the same time, I was like, I want their bodies to do their thing naturally. So, so he would say things like, okay, so why don't you give them a glass of milk instead? That worked for me. So those were the kinds of things that I would incorporate. Okay, after dinner, maybe we'll have one little sweet thing and a glass of milk, and then we brush teeth, and then we do a story, and then you can choose your songs. And, so we had that whole fun routine, and they got to the point where they got into it, like they were talking amongst themselves. Well, what song are you going to ask for? Well, I'm going to ask for this song. And which story are you going to ask for? I'm going to ask for this story. So it became a fun, kind of silly, for lack of a better way to say, but it was always a very positive journey to bed for them, which was what I was trying to create so that it was fun for me and fun for them. I used to feel bad because their dad worked late often. And so he would miss out on a lot of this. And sometimes he would come home, he'd leave work early on a Friday to get home to hear the story so
Oh,
that
that's
he
so
could be part
sweet.
of it.
The
And then
whole thing is so sweet.
he'd sit at the end of the hall in our room to listen to the songs. Which was really fun. And
I love that.
occasionally he would come join me and he would sing a song too. And we'd get silly because he would do a rap song, which was just silly. And then everybody would be laughing. And I was like, okay, that was a little counterproductive, but laughter is always good, right?
Yeah, yeah, that is so typical. Mom is calming down while dad is bringing the energy back
Right.
up.
So true.
So
So
cute.
true.
I love that. And thank you so much for always being so open and sharing your personal experiences. And I can also see the correlation of your experience as a mom with these three very different paths that each of your children took to get to you and that you took to get to them, and how your curiosity and your ability to connect the dots with how their brains would
Mm,
would work and cope and adjust into the
right.
work that
Right.
you do today, working with adoptees, children, as a life coach.
Yeah. And I think that it goes back to just being open to listening to where they're coming from. Just like my own kids, they were all coming from different places. So I think all kids, it's so helpful for them to be heard wherever they're coming from, and recognizing that they have their own opinions and their own thoughts, which was why I always took, recommendations. If they said, can we hear this story? Sure, let's read that story. Can we hear this song? Absolutely. Sometimes I'd sing the same song all week, but that was okay. I don't care.
They love it. Children love knowing what they can expect, which is why it was so good you had the routine. Whenever I have children I'm taking care of or just in parenting my own daughter, I would often give a fill in the blank of our routine. We're going to
Mm.
get home and we're going to brush our teeth. We're going to read our story. We're going to say our prayer and go to sleep. And so she would fill in the blanks, and it was really fun,
That's
but they got to be
cute.
part of it and knew what to expect. And that's so healthy for children at those stages. Really
Right.
healthy for their brain to have that confidence in what's happening next, and that you, as their caregiver, the one that they're relying on for everything at that point in their little brains and bodies and universe, right? That you're someone reliable and you follow through with what you say.
Right.
Yeah, I love
Right.
that. And Tammy, is there anything else that you want to share with parents today or anyone who's listening here at the Let's Talk Adoption podcast? You've shared so much already. There are so many other little things that we could talk about too, but for the sake of time,
Always.
before we
I
close.
think, yeah, I think the only other thing that we were talking about earlier is the firsts that I knew to expect because the
Yes.
agents, both agencies really prepared me, but it was just eye-opening to witness it. So here was a 4-year-old child who had never been outside the walls of the orphanage. The baby house had a playground, but it was all enclosed in cement walls. And so he'd never been in a car, which was, he was like big wide eyes. He'd never worn a seatbelt. And so in the car, he would not wear that seatbelt. He kept taking it off. And I finally was like, okay. But when we got on a plane, that's not a, you have to,
Not optional.
it's not optional. I have to wear a seat. And he screamed for an hour. I was like, I'm so sorry. I just, it is what it's one of those moments where you're like, well, it is what it is. And I'm sorry, folks, but I didn't have any candy. There was nothing I could do to
And
get
a
him to
woman
stop.
came and tried to help you because she speaks Russian.
Right. She said, I can speak Russian because she knew I was bringing him home for, an adoption situation. And I said, yeah, I studied Russian too, and he doesn't speak Russian. And she said, what does he speak? I said, he speaks Kazakh. Do you speak Kazakh? She said, oh, no. I said, thank you anyway. It was a nice try, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so those firsts were things that I knew to expect, but still living through it it's not always easy. It's not what you expect. And you just have to kind of roll with it.
hmm I think on the airplane, that's parents just always dread, how is my child going to behave? And you're just all getting to know each other at this point. You were
Right,
one on one with him at that point because you were
right,
returning for the second time to actually bring him home. So you and your husband had gone
right,
the first time, spent time with him, and had to wait and you came back
right,
for him.
right. And so it was great and exciting. And he was happy to see me. And unfortunately, we both ended up getting sick. I brought over something from the flight over. I had some kind of cold or flu or whatever, and he ended up getting sick, and he was so miserable. And the poor thing ended up, I think I told you last time, he ended up being sick and had two perforated eardrums because he was probably all stuffed up and didn't want to take the medicine. And again, you roll with whatever. And I'm sure that a lot of people who have traveled with babies have been there. It
Hmm
it is what it is, and there's not much you can do. And people were very kind, and he ended up crying himself to sleep, and the rest of the flight home was fine. But that first, the seatbelt thing was tough,
Yeah,
and we got
it's
through it.
probably not one of those details that you were really expecting because when you adopted your son domestically, he was a baby.
Right,
So he got put into an infant car seat
right.
and had nothing to say about it.
Right. And he slept. And he was just
He
easy.
just
He
like,
slept the whole time.
yeah,
I strapped him into the plane seat in a car seat and he didn't make a peep.
right.
So,
So
yeah.
having a child who's already 4 years old, and this is his first time being put into a seatbelt restrained, he doesn't know what's going
Yes.
on. He doesn't know why. You're also not speaking the same language. You were saying learn how to express through nonverbal ways.
Right. Sign language would have been
Yes.
really helpful. I know several people who've learned signed language to speak with their newborn infants because they'll get that faster than they get verbal capability. I wish I had done that with my 4-year-old son because he was so quick, he might have been able to communicate with me better. Again, hindsight is 2020, but maybe that's something that people could try.
I think that's a great tip and something to just be prepared for, and something to do while you're waiting, too,
Right,
to know
right,
and waiting for your travel dates and everything.
exactly.
If you have more questions as you are listening to the Let's Talk Adoption podcast today with Tammy, please write to us at letstalkadoption.com. Tammy, one more time, can you give them your contact information for those who might want to connect with you and see a little bit more about your work and see how it could possibly help a child that they've adopted?
Yes, thank you. I am at youngmindstorycoaching@gmail.com, or they can always call me on my cell phone at 860-966-7574.
Hmm. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tammy, for your generosity and being willing. Oh, you know what we should share? Your son. Now, how old is he? And he
Oh,
is happy and thriving and successful now.
he is. He's 26 years old and he lives in the DC. Actually, he just moved into DC. He lives in an apartment behind the White House, which is amazing. He works for a federal contractor. He's doing design work for he does UX, user experience design, which he loves. He's always been very artistic, and so I encouraged him to go into something artsy, and he felt that user experience design checked all the boxes for him. So he went to UConn, got himself through UConn by joining the Air National Guard, which was brilliant because they paid for your tuition, paid for his tuition. It's very smart. So half of his friends are coming out with all of these student loans, and he doesn't have any. So it's like, wow, you're still so smart.
And he's now traveling, planning his travel with his friends
Yes, he is.
back to his birth country.
He loves to travel. He went to Barcelona last year, sent me pictures of himself and his friends on the beach in Barcelona, and it's like a world traveler
And
now.
I assume he's gotten quite good and accepting of wearing a seatbelt.
Yes, he has.
Well, thank you again. And to all our listeners, be sure to subscribe to Let's Talk Adoption, the podcast, and write to us with more show ideas, questions for Tammy, or you can contact her directly as she has generously shared her contact information. And we will see you on the next episode.